All right. Welcome back to
Filled with the Spirits.
Filled with the Spirits.
I got to say it this time.
Yeah.
I've been saying it a lot. So
Fair enough. I tend to talk more than Jason, but this is a show where we drink a little whiskey and talk about whiskey, and then we talk about Jesus or some aspect of following him in which we have hopefully been filled with the Spirit.
There you go.
So filled with these spirits, and then filled with the Spirit.
So today, these spirits are from Old Forester, correct?
That's right.
Old Forester is a bourbon.
That's right.
Have we done? I don't know if we've done a bourbon
We
yet.
have definitely not done a bourbon. So no matter what order of shows show up out there, this will be our first bourbon episode, mostly because Big Bad Chad is not a bourbon lover. I love whiskey. I just don't love corn whiskey. So
we're going to try some bourbons that definitely have corn, because bourbon legally has to have 51% corn.
That's right.
Or more.
And be aged in the United States in a new charred oak barrel. And the wood has to come from the United States as well, I believe. So.
I've never looked this up. Could you make a bourbon in Hawaii?
I don't know if it has to be the continental United States or if it's just in the U.S. I mean, I think it's like how Scotland kind of claimed Scotch to be Scotch. It has to be made in Scotland.
Yep.
So it may be, and bourbon is kind of the quintessential American whiskey. So despite the fact that American single malt is an up and coming category, I know for sure that bourbon has to be distilled and aged in the United States. So,
and so the misconception is it has to be Kentucky, which is not true.
That's right.
It just has to be in the United States,
That's
which
right.
means Jack Daniels is legally a bourbon.
Yeah, don't.
There's an argument. People hate it.
Hey! Listen,
Tennessee.
If
whiskey,
you're a Jack Daniels guy, I love Tennessee whiskey, especially if it's bourbon-y. So feel free to give us a holler and correct us.
Yep.
We'd love to hear from the Jack Daniels people.
Yeah,
and I don't mean people. I don't mean Jack Daniels lovers. I mean
the company to provide bottles filled with.
That's right.
Your nasty Tennessee whiskey. No, it's not terrible. Okay, so today, Old Forester, it's a bourbon. We've got two different bottles here. One is their 1910, and the other is their
1920.
1920.
So
okay,
this one is specifically their Prohibition style.
So these are from a series they do. I think it's called their Whiskey Row series, and they've got the 1910, the 1920. I think there's like an 18 something, and then I think there's four of them. But basically, they took historical times in either whiskey or in their Old Forester in their distillery, and they made things based off of that. So.
Yeah.
The 1910, I'll read it here real quick. In 1910, a fire on Whiskey Row led to Old Forester being rebarreled into heavily charred barrels. This double-barreled expression follows the same process as the original Old Fine whiskey. So this is double-barreled, evidently. That's what makes this one different, because of a fire that happened in 1910, thus the name 1910.
There you go.
Prohibition style, I think, is based off of...
How about this? Why don't we sample that, and then I'll read the Prohibition style when we get to it. How's that sound?
So Prohibition style is...
Because I will tell you why... This 1910 is a new bottle. It is not mine. It is Jason's. However,
93 proof.
The 1920 is my bottle. So I may have taken a bigger pour than I meant. I will explain why I, not a bourbon lover, have a bottle of bourbon from my house here in a moment. So
fair enough. Yeah, okay. So I want to talk about the 1920. It's more popular than the 1910.
Yeah,
but I
know it is.
I haven't tried this 1910 before. I've never had this bottle.
Yeah, me either. Oh man, it smells very sweet.
Yeah, sweet.
I mean, it
sweet
almost smells like candy. I mean,
there's a hint of like those baking spices that I'm getting from it. Sweet candy.
I smell like a vanilla caramel smell.
Yep.
Oh, wow. It's like candied apple.
Yeah. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that.
Me either.
That's really different than
I tell you what.
You're like, I would drink bourbon.
I could drink a bottle of that.
So The finish is bourbon-esque to me, but up front, there's a lot more happening. It's a double-barreled. Is it more weird wood time? I don't know.
So, I've heard people refer to the flavor you get. So, bourbon is in new oak. It's in virgin oak, whereas most of the Scotch we drink is in second-use casks, right?
Yep.
So, I've heard of the flavor from a bourbon being called barrel candy, so that the flavors that are extracted from that new oak are very candy-esque, and boy, I can taste them all here.
Yeah.
This makes me think of a carnival. I'm at a Halloween carnival, and I'm just getting all these sweet treats, candied apple,
I like this.
Butter candied popcorn.
Yeah.
Just that's what I think of. The smell just makes me think of back in the day. I'm wearing that cheesy little costume that my parents could get at Walmart when we go to the fall carnival that's supposed to also be doubling as Halloween.
Right.
Hey,
We can't.
maybe that's a topic for the second half of our show at some point. But
I got to wear a costume once as a kid, and then we realized that was of the devil. So then, then we just did our trunk or treats. Or no, we never did trunk or treats at the churches I went to. It was like fall festivals inside the gym.
Right.
So
but that's what I think of when it makes me think of that fall festival type.
Now
time.
that you say that, I do get some candy corn kind of flavors on it, and I don't know if that's because that's actually there, or but you put me in the mindset now of October, eating that nasty candy corn, which isn't bad if you mix it with peanuts. This is unlike a lot of like typical bourbons. It is definitely different than like a standard.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few bourbons. This doesn't. So I can typically taste that corn-esque flavor in most bourbons, which is why I don't like them.
Yep.
I don't really taste a lot of it here.
I get that on the finish, but up
front,
front,
it's definitely not there.
Yep.
It's very, very candy-esque.
Yep. Well, yeah, it's in when whiskey goes into the barrel, it looks like your water here, right? I mean, it's
just clear. It looks like
totally
moonshine.
Clear. So all that
or
color,
what people would associate. Yeah, that comes from the barrel.
It's literally the wood, just
the char and the flavors inside the wood kind of leaching into the liquid.
I'll accept that term. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I think in this series of 4, people usually put this one as their second favorite. I think that's what I
can see that.
That's what I was reading. People really like this 1920. I've had it before. I've had it at your house, the same bottle that you've had forever because you don't love bourbon.
Right. In fact, I've kept it so that when you visit, you have a bourbon to drink. Although now you've become a Scotch drinker, so you rarely hit it.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I don't drink near as much bourbon as I used to. I do really like this, though. It has...
Yeah, I do too.
So I don't want to fool people who don't like bourbon and like Scotch, but if you're a bourbon drinker and you hate Scotch, but you like this bourbon, the upfront flavor of this is not unlike that Dalmore 18 we had.
Yeah, but it's way sweeter.
Way sweeter, but it's that dark.
No, you're right.
It's less of the fruity, but it's that darker.
Yeah. Yeah. So imagine if the Dalmore 18 is like dark fruits with, with a little bit of hint of like leather or tobacco. This is the same kind of thing, but as if they also added a scoop of sugar.
Yes. Yep.
So, and probably that's attributed. So probably, it's a lot of that sweetness comes from the new barrel versus the reused casks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So also on that same note, if you are a Scotch drinker and you don't like bourbon, like this man right here, you may enjoy this. That was like a $50-ish bottle, I think.
Okay.
Maybe something like that.
I think all of them in this series are pretty close to the same.
Yep.
Between $50 and $60.
If they had been $30, I would have bought the other two.
Right.
But at $50, like
No, I agree. Especially,
we gotta let Old Forester have something to send us.
That's right. That's right. We could try the other two on air.
We could.
Old Forester.
If
Whiskey sponsor.
they wanted to do that.
I mean, I'd love to say filled with the spirits brought to you by, and then
But
name. But
we're not going to say
as of right now,
there's no name involved.
But we could always add that in post production. Just
Brought to you by. Yeah. All right, so that was the 1910.
That's right. So I have
double
a
barrel.
friend that I played soccer with many moons ago. I don't want to call him out and get him in trouble, but my guess is his name is common enough. Well, I'll just call him Dustin because that's his first name. So,
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, Dustin is a bourbon guy, and so I sent when I was new into Scotch, I had a bottle of now I can't remember what it is. It is Ardbeg. So a bottle of Ardbeg, and I believe the particular style was called Oogdale, maybe. It was super smoky. I mean, it tasted
Destroy
like
your palate.
Yeah, that's right. It tasted like you had gone into my smoker and taken the charred bits that didn't cook all the way and put them in water and swirl them around.
A lot of those smoky ones, I get like a medicinal flavor as well. Like I think of like if someone took a dirty Band-Aid and left it in a campfire overnight and then you licked it. That's what I get out of it. But I'm enjoying some of the smoky stuff more now that I'm getting into it.
Right. But yeah, this
you
was
can't start with
super
that.
smoky. And so I sent it up to him via a friend, and he called it and said, hey, that's never going to get drank. Do you want it back?
All right.
But he did suggest, I said, I'm not a big bourbon guy. And he said, well, try the Old Forester 1920. If you're not a bourbon guy, that has the best chance to make you a bourbon guy. Okay. Now, to be fair, it did not.
Yep. And this was how many years ago? And it's,
this is probably, it was pre-COVID, so 2019 at some point.
Okay.
Maybe early 2020 prior to COVID, but something like that.
I think I tried that bottle at your house not the night I met you, but the first time I came over to your place.
Yeah, which was in the summer, probably June-ish of 2020.
Yep.
When we finally had permissions from the
powers that be,
the COVID overlords that we could congregate appropriately. I mean, of course, we sat 6 feet apart and wore masks the whole time. So
this was not recorded in June of 2020. I promise. We didn't hold this to upload.
This is definitely in 2022, so we're all good.
Okay, so the 1920 Prohibition style. This one.
Oh yeah, you want to read it, or you want to read it?
I'll read about it. So this whiskey is distilled by us only, and we are responsible for its witness. That's not.
Look on the front. It talks about it on the front.
Like this sounds like everything they put on their bottles. Yeah, here we go. In 1920, during Prohibition, Owsley Brown was granted a limited permit to bottle medicinal whiskey at their address in Louisville on Whiskey Row. Typical barrel proof at that time to bottling was 115. So this is 115 proof.
It's for medicinal purposes only. Yeah. So if you drink this, it's only to help you with your cough, which is what I'm about to have some.
There were like three distilleries that were allowed to stay open during Prohibition.
That's right.
For the purposes.
For medicinal purposes only. And man, I can't tell you how many people needed medicine.
Yep.
All of a sudden.
Yep. So there you go. That's what this one is about. 115 proof. Should be a lot stronger.
So it certainly doesn't smell as sweet.
No, it's a lot harsher on the nose.
Yeah. So the previous one was 93 proof. And this is 115 proof. So, I mean,
it smells stronger. Doesn't have that candied
it's
flavor.
10% more alcohol by volume. That's a significant difference.
It's significantly lighter, too. I guess that's probably the double barrel for
the
other one. But I'm not getting that candied, dark candied.
It's definitely doesn't. Although, I get some caramel. Caramel, maybe a little bit of toastiness,
Yeah, I get a little caramel on the. I wasn't smelling it, but I may have took it too big of a. I was just getting the alcohol on the nose. Yeah, there's a little bit of that caramel. There's way less of that candy flavor.
It's
Little
still there though.
caramel.
I mean, I'm still get the sweetness.
Well, that's just from being bourbon, probably, right? But
Bourbon is sweet, yes.
Yep. But this is like the 1910 was kind of over the top, that
Yes.
extra candiness. And
It was
this one,
super sweet. It was by far the sweetest, I think, whiskey I've had.
Yep. Which, again, to clarify, if you are watching this and you are not a whiskey person, don't drink that thinking you're going to be drinking Kool-Aid. It is not going to be sweet in those terms.
That's right.
It is sweet
That's right.
as far as whiskeys go, right?
That's right.
Yep.
It's sweet compared to other whiskeys, and if you haven't developed a whiskey palate, all you're probably going to taste is whiskey.
Yeah. Like, my throat hurts.
Right?
That
Like,
was burning. Yep.
you know, so a lot of your over-the-counter whiskeys, you know, popular name brands are going to be bottled at around 80 proof, right?
Yeah, 80 to 90 for bourbons.
Okay.
The cheaper they get, the lower proof they are because they're watering them down more. But yeah,
So, so the 93 proof is a little bit higher than what you would get typically anyway. The 115 proof is way higher than
it's
what
a
you
lot
would
higher.
get
Yeah.
typically.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'll say this. If this isn't my first sip of the night, I could drink this pretty consistently.
Yeah. There's no bad flavors.
No.
I don't know.
I taste some corn on the finish, and that's the flavor that puts me off most of the time in bourbon.
Yep.
So, but it's, and I say I taste the corn. You can't compare this to corn on the cob.
Yeah, it's not.
I don't mean it that way. I mean there's a sweetness that I associate with grain, and it's corn grain.
Yep.
Versus malted barley, that to me tastes very grainy. And so grainy is not the right term. It's just the only way I can categorize it.
Because it's the grains that it's made with versus
Right.
the corn kernels, right?
So, it's pretty good.
Yeah, so first of all, 115 proof. Again, that is higher proof. It's not over the top hot. Like, you can get bourbons at like 120, 130. Like, there are 130 bourbons. They're hard to find. They're also very strong. 115 is definitely on the high end of it. It's not over the top high. This doesn't drink like 115 proof. It doesn't feel quite that hot. Maybe that's just because we already had the 93. But when I have a higher proof bourbon, typically I'm getting a lot more of those kind of, again, baking spice kind of notes, some of that sweetness, and I can pull out flavors a bit better. Again, maybe it's just because we should have done that one first. I don't know.
Yeah.
Normally I would do the lighter proof first.
We didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah, because the problem is if you do the high proof and then the lighter proof, in some ways you've tainted your palate to a certain extent.
Yep. Yeah, but I think we did that with the overpowering flavors.
Yeah, it's because there's so much sweetness.
Yep.
In that 1910.
But it's a good bourbon for sure.
It
I
is.
guess what I was getting at is I don't know that I would buy that very often at the $55 price point. Maybe if I wanted a higher proof bourbon, maybe I would go for that. But like that 1920 is really popular. It's one of the most popular Old
I'm sure it
Foresters,
is.
apart from the birthday bourbon, which everyone that I've had is amazing.
Right.
But you can't get it.
I've never had one, but
I had one at the Houston Whiskey Social. It might have been. It was the best bourbon I had that night for sure.
But that wasn't this last time, was it?
It was.
Wow,
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
It was. I think I'd ran off by myself.
Fair enough.
Most of the scotches we
I
had, they
did
were
not
great.
have it. Why? Because I'm not a bourbon guy. Okay, so I definitely was drinking Scotch galore. I had a couple of. I definitely had some American single malts that night. But yeah, I'm just not going to go. Well, there's the biggest lines. That's the greatest thing about being a Scotch lover and not a bourbon lover is when you go to an event like that, the biggest lines are going to be at the bourbon.
Yeah, the
tables.
bourbon boom has been ridiculous. I mean, it's just blown up.
And so it's great for me because I don't feel like I'm missing anything
Yep.
by not losing all that time in that line. And I can go hit all the scotches and hit. There was a couple scotches I hit more than once. Not many, but I definitely there was that one table. Were those Alexander Murray bottles?
Yes. And it was
Jeez. Yes,
I immediately picture it's that cream label with the red scripty font.
And
they had one or two bottles there that were like really good.
That's right. I hit one of those twice, and I just remember going, and I think I got like to the second to last pour on that one bottle, and I was just like, ooh, in my mind, I was thinking, I am so glad I got to try this, because those bottles were ridiculous. They're like probably $350 to $600 bottles, and they were giving us pours.
Bottles that we will only own if
that's right. If I win the lottery, or if Alexander Murray wants to be the sponsor of Filled with Spirits, we might have a lot of Anglicans watching this podcast, so you just never know.
That's a theological joke, not theological, denomination joke.
There you go,
denominational joke. Yeah, good stuff. I think I did not expect this, by the way. I think I like the 1910 better than the 1920. Maybe that's because of.
I definitely like it better
now that I lean to scotches more. I think there's more things happening there. I mean, it's definitely not a scotch by any means. It's definitely a bourbon.
But because of the flavor, it's almost like. So Jason and I both like sherry cask whiskeys. This is almost like I don't know how you say it right, but Marciano cherry.
Yep.
So it's almost
maraschino is how we say it in Southeast
Thank
Texas.
you.
I don't know if that's.
It's as if they barreled maraschino cherries and they aged it in a maraschino cherry cask, right? So can you see that? Can you imagine that in your mind's eye?
That should maybe happen at some point.
Jason's like, hey, Chad, maybe we should buy some cherries. Yep. I have a couple aging barrels at my house, so so if you hear us allude to that, that's why. Because from time to time, I might age spirits in my aging barrel. Wow, yeah, I think for my next pour, I'm going back to 93, or the 1910.
Yeah, and there's more of it, right? So
there is.
Yeah, unless you need to clear space.
I tell you what, if it because you've had so much of my 1920, when it's time for me to leave, if you just want to keep the 1920 and send me over
the little switchy. That way I'll have something delicious to drink when I'm at your house.
That's right. That way you'll if you sit at home with me,
a week later it's gone. Yeah. It's crazy to me how much darker. I mean, it makes sense, right, that it would be that much darker, but it is a lot darker than that other one.
Yeah, it's because it got, so that's probably why it's so sweet. They called it double barreled, right?
Yep.
So they probably put it in 2 new use barrels.
Yeah.
So it got the barrel candy of 2 barrels, so it was instead of just one.
What do you think? Like maybe 3 years in one and 3 in another, or maybe 2.5. Some, I mean, roughly.
Right. That,
because it's probably not more than it doesn't taste like it's more than a 6 to 8 year.
I don't have a foundation for that. Yep. So
because I mean,
bourbons don't have a lot of age statement bourbons, right?
They used to. They don't now because of the bourbon boom. Now that they're not putting age statements on things because it's more expensive, right? Because when they can mix stuff. But most bourbons this is a huge generalization, but most bourbons that don't have age statements that are a mediocre to decent bottle, in my experience, are going to be between maybe 4 to 8 years, and I'm typically buying the ones that are maybe 6 to 8. But yeah, most of them don't have age statements anymore, unless you're buying more expensive, like Weller 12s or something like that. At some point, we'll taste some Wellers, and those are made with more wheat, so they're even sweeter.
Oh wow!
Than corn bourbons, but
I mean, they have corn in them, or they
do. But instead of it's less rye and more wheat. So the rye gives you that spice, and so then the wheat gives you even more sweetness.
Right.
Have you had any Weller stuff before? Or it's like Maker's Mark. Have you had Maker's Mark? Maybe mixed. But probably not straight.
Yeah. I might have had Maker's Mark at a ball game or something.
Yeah. It'd be fun. At some point, we'll do that. We'll try
typically, if I go somewhere and I need is not the right word, and I'm hoping to enjoy a spirit, most places will have some Jameson.
Yep.
And if they don't have Jameson, I might do a Chivas Regal or something like that, which
I don't think I've ever had that.
A blended Scotch. I mean, it's okay. Like,
I don't know that I've ever had a blended Scotch that I didn't.
Typically, if they don't have Jameson, then I'll just abstain, unless someone else is paying. In which case, okay, I'll have a Chivas.
Jameson is a It's not amazing by any means.
No,
But it is one of the best. Like, can find it almost anywhere.
Not just that, it's going to give you a consistent flavor profile no matter what. You can drink it neat, and it's an Irish whiskey, and it's a middle of the road Irish whiskey. So, so you're not going to find Old Forester at the ball game.
Yeah, no, not going to happen.
So, I'm not going to drink Maker's Mark typically because I'm going to, if I'm going to drink Maker's Mark, it's going to be because I bought the bottle because of that cool wax thing.
Because it's cool, yeah.
The cool wax thing is worth it, but
pretty cool.
But you don't get that when you're getting some at the ball game. So.
This is related because Maker's Mark, but we're not. I mean, we're talking about bourbon. It's related.
That's right.
So Maker's Mark has an ambassador program where you sign up. It's free. You just give them your information. But I mean, everybody has your information anyway these days. You give them your email address, and they sign you up as an ambassador. And every Christmas, they will send you a gift. So it's like, I've got some playing cards they sent me. One time they sent you like a sweater for the bottle. It's just every Christmas.
That's actually kind of cool.
It's pretty cool. And it's free. The best part about it, though, is when you sign up, they put your name on a plaque on a barrel that sits in one of their warehouses. And then after 6 or 7 years, you can actually go to the distillery and buy a bottle from that barrel.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah. So I did it 4 years ago.
I mean,
so I'm 4 years in, but it's not going to be ready for at least another 2 years.
I mean, it's kind of cool.
We're going to take a pause real quick, and Chad's going to sign up on his phone. Anyway, so that's worth checking out. If you like bourbon.
Yeah, but that's Weller's, so that's not Old Forester, which is what we're talking about today, in case the Old Forester company
Old Forester,
wants.
you guys should
we'll cut that whole section out about Weller, just saying, if you need us to.
If you want to give us bottles of
That's
Old Forester.
right. So,
Anyway, bourbon is, it was my first love. Scotch has you've turned me on to it. But I don't know. This is pretty good. I don't hate the 1920 by any means.
No. I mean,
it had a.
So 1920 to me is very.
I think you're peeking on your microphone. Move a little either.
Sorry.
Take it down. Whisper or.
1920.
That's not good for the audience. They need somewhere in the middle.
So makes me think of some sketch from Saturday Night Live where Will Ferrell talks softly into the microphone like he's some kind of a radio, host of some sort.
All right.
Anyway, the 1920 to me, I'm gonna get loud again. So sorry. It's what I would consider the typical bourbon, but like a notch above typical.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're going for, right? I mean, it's the only thing different about this is the 115 proof, and that is because that is typically what they did in the Prohibition time. So
it's supposed to be in that style.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, some of the reason for the higher cost is that higher proof, right? Because they're not watering it down as much that it don't get as many bottles.
Yeah. So if you don't know the way that works, they're going to mash. So mash simply means in water they warm up the grain and get it to a certain temperature so that the enzymes inside the grain or the enzymes that they add to the mash will then break down the sugars that are inherent in the grain, okay? And then those sugars, once they're into the mash or into the fluid, then they'll add yeast to it, and that yeast will consume the sugar, and the byproduct is alcohol and carbon dioxide. So we put yeast into bread because that carbon dioxide makes the bread rise and puff up. We put that into a whiskey mash because we don't care about the carbon dioxide, but we care about the alcohol that it produces. So the more alcohol or the more sugars, the more alcohol you get. But at the end of the day, when they distill it and then barrel it, they'll still have a finite amount of alcohol. And so if you get a barrel and that barrel is at, let's say, 60% alcohol by volume, if you're going to water that down to make bottles of 45% alcohol by volume, it's going to go further than if you're going to water it down to be 57% alcohol by volume. And so it still took the same amount of grain to make those two different barrels. It's just one of them you got to make more bottles, so you can sell those bottles for less cost.
For less money, yeah. So that's one of the reasons that would be more expensive. It is what I mean, it's not bad by any means. I think it had been hyped up so much because when that came out, it wasn't hard to find. Well, it was kind of hard to find for maybe a month or two, but people really talked it up that like they really liked it. It was great. To me, it's it's not unlike. It's different than Old Granddad 114, but it's like same proof level, less of the oily peanut flavor, but it's not a whole lot different than that, and that's a $15-$20 bottle of bourbon. I don't think it's that much more impressive than that. If that makes sense. Now this one, I'd probably buy that again.
Yeah,
I might buy that again.
Here's what I'll say: the last bottle of bourbon I bought was Yellow Rose, their outlaw bourbon. And I bought it because I got to tour the distillery and taste it. And I thought, okay, this is something I want to have around. If I bought another bottle of bourbon, it would, unless how I got to buy like a Blanton's.
Yep.
I've had Blanton's. Blanton's is pretty smooth. I enjoy it. Smooth is not the right word. I know some whiskey aficionados.
People on YouTube are like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. But I like Blanton's in the sense that it doesn't taste as corn-laden to me, even though I'm sure it's made with more than 50% corn. But this also doesn't taste as corn-laden.
Yep.
I could drink this on a pretty regular basis.
Yep. I'm a fan. All right, so there you go. That's the Whiskey Row, half of the Whiskey Row series.
That's right.
I think the two most popular of them. Maybe at some point we'll find the others.
There you go.
And try those out.
The Old Fine Whiskey from 1910 and the Prohibition style from 1920. So, all right. So now we're going to transition into the aspect of our show where we talk about
theological and churchy and
that's right.
Jesus type of things.
That's right.
What did we decide we're going to talk about today?
So
I think we did talk about it for about 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah. So just to kind of clarify, we try not to settle on topics too far ahead of time, mostly because we're not speaking to you from authority. We're speaking as two guys who have been followers of Christ for a long time, and readers of the Bible. But just like anybody, we can be fallible. So we're talking about our opinions based on our interpretation, but we haven't necessarily researched this topic. This is a topic that we're talking about on the fly, just like it would happen if we were having a conversation at dinner. So.
Yeah, and you guys should do this too. I mean, this is good. This is two believers hanging out and bouncing ideas off of each other, and there's a chance Chad will be wrong about some stuff. I mean, I probably won't be, but
it's a pretty small chance.
It's a small chance.
No, I mean, like 3 days a year, I'm probably wrong, but
and we only record these podcasts 3 times.
I'm just guessing this is not one of those days. I teach AP Physics, so that probably means I'm right most of the time.
Makes sense. Anyway, that's the point. We're having conversation, and hopefully we learn stuff from each other, and iron sharpening iron, and
that's right. Iron sharpening iron should be a mantra. Maybe we'll end up changing. No, because there's no whiskey in iron sharpening.
We'll figure something.
So, anyway, so the topic that I'd mentioned right before we went live today was the idea that so Jesus said, and I'm obviously paraphrasing to a certain extent, that he didn't come to abolish the law, but he came to fulfill the law. So, I think that begs the question.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? And if he's the fulfillment of the law, what is our expected response to that? Is there some set of Jesus rules that we're supposed to follow?
Jesus does rule.
and if so, which rules are we supposed to, if my child is disrespectful to me, am I supposed to stone him? Because trust me, there was a moment or two. In case you didn't know, all my children have grown and graduated high school,
and none have been stoned, to my knowledge. Wait, that's
no,
not what I meant, actually. But
I think actually that's probably true. None of them have been stoned either way.
You've not thrown rocks at your children.
That's right. I've not thrown literal rocks. I might have thrown metaphorical rocks at them because sometimes I can be fairly harsh with my judgmentalism. But anyway,
so yeah, so I'll tell you what I think that means.
Okay, awesome.
And then we can have a conversation about that.
And while you do that, I'm going to drink some of this 1910. So
Good.
Keep going.
It's delicious. Okay, so Jesus came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. So, the analogy that I like to use, which I got from a friend of mine, first name Lewis, I won't say his last name, but he probably wants credit for it. Anyway,
Lewis, if you're watching, go ahead and post your name.
yeah, post your name. Yeah, that's what it is. If you want to get credit for this, then you can get credit,
and we will acknowledge that it was you,
and you can correct the story, the analogy when I make mistakes on it. So, we're in Houston. Let's talk about the Houston Texans. If they hire, this is related, I promise. If they hire me to be their quarterback, right? I sign a contract that I have to get 100 touchdowns before the end of the season, and then if I do, they're gonna give me $50 million for the season. If I don't, they're gonna kill me, right? Let's just say that they're gonna kill me. The Houston Texans are not good. They have to have strong contracts.
By the way, I think you just put a new twist on Survivor and football.
Yep. I did that unintentionally.
Okay.
So, if that is the contract that I sign this, I'm playing the last game of the season. I have got 0 throwing touchdowns for the year. It's not looking good because I play for the Houston Texans, and it's not good. So then, if Jesus comes in and he's like the backup quarterback and he's going to throw and he gets the 100 touchdowns that game, which is ridiculous, but let's say it happens,
okay.
And then now he's fulfilled the obligations of that contract, right, for me. So now, like, I went to a Southern Baptist youth group too. Okay, the point is, now do I need to fulfill that contract? Do I need to get those 100 touchdowns? No, because the contract has been fulfilled. So the idea of, did Jesus come to abolish the law, like to rip up that contract that I had with the Texans? No, he didn't come to rip it up. He came to fulfill it. So fulfill it means accomplish it, and then do it, and then it's done away with. So all that to say, and maybe I should have started with this and then give you the analogy, I think that the old covenant law is completely done away with because Jesus fulfilled that law. He didn't abolish it. He didn't rip it up, didn't say it doesn't matter. He fulfilled it completely. And so now we don't have to, nor should we, follow Old Testament law. I think we should still study the Old Testament. I still think it points us to Christ. I'm not saying we do away with the Old Testament, right? Should definitely study and understand the Old Testament. It still has lots to do with Christianity. But we don't go to the Old Testament for how we should live our life. We go to the New Testament for that, and what the Old Testament was pointing to, which is to Christ. So the flip side of that is, so most people either believe what I just said, or I think maybe even more people would believe in what they call the tripart division of the law, which is that the Old Testament law was... By
the way, you always have really fancy terms.
I know. I just like people to Google
topics that we're supposed to have not have researched.
Right. The problem is that, like, there's historical research from years ago, so people are going to Google this and be like, you said this all wrong. You studied this 3 years ago, clearly. Tripart division of the law, here's where I'm going to mess it up because it wasn't recent study. Civil law, ceremonial law, and moral law. They'll split up the Old Testament into all laws from the Old Testament are one of those 3 things, right? And so people who believe in the tripart division of the law would say that we no longer follow the civil or the ceremonial laws of the Old Testament, but we still follow the moral laws. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So that's a pretty common belief, I think, is that and I think that's probably the fallback standard. And, you know, going back to our Revelation episode, my fallback standard was...
Keep going.
My fallback standard was believing in, like, the Left Behind series was what Revelation meant, right? It just... I didn't really think about it. It was the fallback.
Okay.
I think that's true of the tripart division of the law, is that even if you don't categorize it that way, people just kind of think, oh yeah, well, we don't worry about, like, the shellfish, not eating shellfish. We don't worry about, like, not mixing, fabric of our clothing, because those are all, like, ceremonial laws. But the moral ones we still follow. And I would say that all of those were done away with when Christ fulfilled those. So now, what do we follow? That begs that question.
Okay,
right?
Before we get there, yeah, we got to deal with this other stuff.
We are not without law. Let me say that in case people get off.
Okay, so hang on. I think maybe you and I are talking about different things.
Oh, this is very exciting.
So what would you categorize as the law?
So it depends on the context of that, right?
I kind of paraphrase Jesus. So what do you think? What do you think Jesus was categorizing as the law?
So when you say the law, it depends on when Jesus is talking about the law too, right? Because he could be referring to the Old Testament law, which was the 300, 400 something different things, right?
Okay.
The 10 Commandments
All right.
and everything else.
Okay,
But-
so that's where I think you and I have differing opinions, or maybe we don't, and we just haven't expressed it well enough. Because I don't think it's the 10 Commandments and I think it's the 10 Commandments.
Well, that's a great starting point. So, like, I would say, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus kind of points to the 10 Commandments.
That's right.
Except for the Sabbath day. He doesn't mention the Sabbath day. So,
Right, but so he starts with the 10 Commandments as his basis.
yeah, I think it's because the audience knew that. Yeah. So So let me back up then. Though, when people ask, like, as a Christian, should you follow the 10 Commandments? If I have a 5-minute conversation with him, I'll say no. Like, the 10 Commandments is not for New Testament believers.
That's interesting because. So let's go back to your analogy, because I thought your analogy was somewhat appropriate. All right. So apparently I just knocked down a part of our set.
It was just barely holding on there. You could just set it off to
I'm
the
just
side.
going to set it down. So I don't know how much it showed up on the camera.
I needed to
but,
put a new. We'll just stay on the close up.
It's my fault there, J-Dog.
Now people see the lights. Anyway, so my analogy.
That's
Go ahead.
okay. Your analogy about Jesus coming in and satisfying your contract with the Texans. But does that preclude you from doing your best to help the Texans win?
No.
Okay. And so that's where I say, like, hold on. You're not going to die if you don't satisfy those conditions. But that doesn't preclude you from trying to satisfy those conditions.
So
It just precludes you from the penalty thereof.
I would say it does. So if
if Jesus showed up and played, he played for you and
First of all,
satisfied the conditions, and then he's no longer so now he's gone, and you're still there.
no, that contract has been completely fulfilled. So it's
That's
done away
not the
with.
point. Wait. So you no longer play for the Texans, even
No.
though the game's not over?
Nope. You are not. You have nothing to. No, the season's over. Your contract is completely fulfilled. You're done.
So
Okay, analogies only go so far.
No,
But we can keep on it.
you're right, but I'm saying, so I think you're talking about the difference between the covenant between people, or the Jews, and God, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then our expectation to attempt to live for God. So I don't know how to express this appropriately.
So let me talk through it a bit more.
Okay,
'Cause I
yeah.
think
Flesh it out, and let's see if we can get to some common ground
and
here.
I think we will. That's why I said when I have 5 minutes or so to have that conversation, I would say no, Christians don't follow the 10 Commandments. But the caveat of that is, yes, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is referencing the 10 Commandments.
Definitely.
Right? Not mentioning the Sabbath. So like if you... So is it in Isaiah or Zechariah? Somewhere towards the end of the Old Testament. With the changing of law... with the changing of covenant comes the changing of law, right? So when the covenant changes, the law goes with that. The covenant and the law, you can't separate those things. So you have old covenant,
Okay.
which goes with the Old Testament law. And then Jesus comes in, again, not to abolish the law, not to rip up the contract, but to fulfill it. Now
Right.
that he's fulfilled it, all of the requirements of the law have been completely fulfilled, not ripped up, but like done perfectly, fulfilled. Now that is done away with. And now Jesus has brought a new covenant. So the new covenant that Jesus brings is now what we follow. Now, because the God of the Old Testament is not different from the God of the New Testament, it's the same God, right? these laws are coming from the same
Right.
person, right? Or the same spirit God. So it would make sense that a lot of this would be the same. So when Jesus comes in and he flips the 10 commandments on their head, he said, you've heard it said that you shouldn't kill. I say you shouldn't,
Be mad at your brother.
Yeah, exactly. So there's all of those flips. So 9 out of the 10 commandments are brought up again and taken a step further in the New Testament, the Sermon on the Mount, except for the Sabbath day. So the reason I would say that we don't follow the 10 commandments is because the 10 commandments as a whole are 10 things. Now, 9 out of 10
because
of them,
they're inadequate.
Yeah, I think they are inadequate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
I can buy into that. I thought you were saying they'll basically disregard the idea of the 10 commandments because one of them is not inadequate, for sure. In fact, Jesus said the whole of everything lie in these 2 ideas.
Yep.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and might.
Yep.
And love your neighbor as yourself.
Yep.
So
all of the commandments are wrapped up in this.
They are. That's right. All the commandments are wrapped up in them, which basically, so to me, that said, you should still attempt to fulfill the commandments, not for the commandments' sake, for my sake.
So where I would disagree there is that we shouldn't fulfill those Old Testament, Old Covenant commandments. We should fulfill the commandments of Christ.
Of course.
Which
is love the Lord your God with all your...
So there's a lot of overlap there.
But my point is, the fulfillment of the individual commandments do, like, not to the exclusion of other ideas, right? So you can't say, well, I don't covet my neighbor's wife. Oh, but I did have sex with her. So like the whole idea is not coveting your neighbor, not committing adultery. That is loving your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah, but you don't have to go to the Old Covenant to see that. You can go to Jesus to see that.
Okay.
That's my whole point. So
all right.
I think and
so we're talking around each other. I think
we really,
so.
which happens a lot with these conversations. Because when you say that, again, that's why I say I like to start when I have a 5-minute time to have the conversation with people. Is obviously that rubs people the wrong way when you say no, Christians should not follow the 10 Commandments. Because I wholeheartedly believe that. Like,
right.
As a believer, I am not beholden to the 10 Commandments.
Right.
I'm beholden to the law of Christ.
Sure.
Which there is some overlap for sure.
Right.
But really, with the 10 Commandments specifically, the biggest thing is on the Sabbath day, right?
But what you're saying is you shouldn't... Let me say if I can characterize this appropriately. You're not saying the idea of some of those commandments has no bearing on your actions.
No, they have even more than they
right.
did in the Old Covenant.
Which is... So the way you expressed it was... Hey, the 10 Commandments are done away with. And so when I hear that, I think you're saying, oh, we can ignore those.
Yeah, I think that's how Scripture defines it, though, is that I don't know if ignore is the right word, right? Because I still think there is value. I think there's a ton of value in studying the Old Testament and is how it points to Christ. But you interpret the Old Testament based off of the New Testament, not the other way around.
Right.
Right. So knowing what we know of Christ now, that's how we interpret the Old Testament.
Okay.
And so I still yes, it can sound controversial, I guess, that to not follow the 10 Commandments. But I truly believe that we should not be following the 10 Commandments. We should be following the law of Christ because...
Which is intimated where?
So that's in the New Testament. So it's the Sermon on the Mount.
Right. Okay, that's what I was trying to get.
Yeah, it starts with the Sermon on the Mount.
I mean, so to me, yes. So if you want to say we're not beholden to the 10 Commandments because we're beholden to a higher standard, it begins in the Sermon on the Mount.
How about this analogy? If I commit murder in Texas here, I'm not beholden to the government of England, of the UK.
Okay.
It's still wrong that I committed murder in both places. But who am I accountable to? Am I accountable? Did I break the laws of England or did I break the laws of the United States? I'm accountable in no way to England, even though those laws may overlap. I don't have to follow the law of the UK. It doesn't matter to me. It is only the thing that I am under, which is the New Covenant, which is so the law of
Right.
the United States. So when I commit murder here, I am not breaking the law of Moses. I'm breaking the law of Christ
Okay.
because I'm under the new covenant. I'm under the new covenant. I'm not under the law.
But
the old
I
covenant.
feel like that's semantics.
In just these things, it may be semantics, but
Because
there's a lot of implications. I
So
think.
to me, the Ten Commandments are not the law of Moses. They're the law of God. Hold on.
okay, yeah.
So, I
Okay.
mean, we could look at the beginning of John. Sorry, I haven't
It's
read
hard
the,
to do.
the
In the
first
beginning
chapter.
was the Word, and the Word was God. And
That's right.
This is
The Word,
the hard one.
The Word was God, and the Word was with God. Right. And who is the Word?
Christ.
Right. So I mean, if that law was handed directly from God to Moses, then there's no way of getting around that Jesus was part of creating that
Yes,
law.
but that was the purpose of it. So this goes back to, is it in Galatians where Paul talks about how the law was the you're gonna hate me for using big words again. The pedagogos is the Greek word for it. So petty is,
I have a degree in pedagogy, so
oh well, there you go. So you know what it means, right? So the the idea, the petty meaning the like kid, right?
Right.
And the gogi meaning this not bulgogi from Korean barbecue, but the study, the teaching, right? And so
yes.
that was the intention of the old covenant. It was the law existed as our nanny, so to speak.
Sure.
Right?
To teach us.
Yes. That was the point.
The law existed to teach us how to relate to God in an
Yes.
appropriate manner.
Yeah. So it was never supposed to be. It was. You don't have a nanny when you're 25, right? That's the analogy there.
Sure, okay.
So the old covenant was intentionally the way that it was up until the point of Christ. So you have old covenant and then you have new covenant. And when Christ comes, you do away with the nanny. You don't need the pedagogos anymore, right? You don't need the old covenant because Christ comes in and brings a new covenant, and with a new covenant comes a new law.
Right.
So,
But
yes,
that law, that new law, despite the fact that we have, in theory, more freedom, is also way more restrictive.
it's both. Yeah.
Because he says directly to Peter, the guy, the guy who had just told everybody, I don't know that guy. I don't know who that is. He said, if you love me, follow my commandments.
Yes. And that's my only argument, is that we follow the law of Christ, that we don't. So ultimately what this comes back to is, how do you break? So when people break up the Old Testament law, which is the 10 Commandments, but also everything else in
Okay.
Leviticus, right?
All right.
So a lot of people will break that up into 3 parts. And what I'm saying is that doesn't make any sense, right? You don't break it up into moral, civil, and ceremonial.
No.
It all comes together. So
You break it up into the 2 parts that he specifically said. He said all the law and the prophets come down to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul.
Yes.
Sorry,
So-
I said that weird. But
so
and love your
if
neighbor
that's
as yourself.
true, if all of it comes down to that, then there's no way you can split it up into ceremonial and
I
civil.
don't disagree with
because
you
if you
there.
break a civil law, that's still a moral infraction, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, there's no. So to me, this is the issue we get hung up on. Is, well, I fulfilled the letter of this law. I mean, it boils down. I know I've intimated multiple times, and I believe on this podcast that the point of the Sermon on the Mount was to say it matters what your intent is.
yep.
And so if your intent is to love your neighbor as yourself, then you're not violating Jesus' law, which means you're also not violating the 10 Commandments, right? Right.
It depends. It depends. Okay, so for 9 out of 10, yes. So that's where it breaks. That's where the breakdown is when you get to the Sabbath, and it's, and again, it's not just the 10 Commandments. It's
Hold on.
also
So,
all the other.
Well, but the law says honor the Sabbath and keep it holy, right?
The old covenant law. says that.
But so I guess it depends on what you
So
deem as the Sabbath. So if you're trying to go by the letter of the law and say it's this specific day, but I think the Sabbath is an idea.
I don't think that was the case in the old covenant. I think it was very, very clearly a Saturday,
Okay.
and
All
it
right.
was and it was meant for a time of rest.
Well, sure, but they didn't have the freedom that we have in Christ.
Exactly. That's my point.
Okay.
So I don't. But
I would say it's not that those don't apply. It's just they've been redefined.
To some, depending on what you mean by that, I would agree. Yes. So
Okay.
I don't believe that there is such a thing as a Christian Sabbath, right? So
Okay.
So Sabbath originally is Saturday, right?
But
people-
I think it's a day dedicated to Christ. I'm sorry. To God.
My Bible says in Galatians that some people separate, consider one day better than another.
That's right. Which is
But in Christ, all days are the same. The point
Correct.
is that I don't think any day is special. That now that we are in the new covenant, that our
Okay.
entire lives are supposed to be dedicated to Christ.
Right.
So, but let me
In
tell you,
fact,
there's some.
I went so far as to suggest to someone, and I think they had never considered this idea. The only reason I considered it is because I came to the realization a long time ago that of the commodities we have in our life, the one we will never generate more of, no matter what we do, is time. If you believe God's in control and He has your days numbered, then your day is coming, right? Your day where your mortal life will end is coming. You cannot create more time. And so if you're willing to sacrifice every aspect of your life for Him but your time, you're probably sinning, right?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what are the two commandments,
Right.
Love the Lord your God with our heart, mind, soul.
Right.
So, but the background, and I realize we're probably way over time. We should probably start wrapping this up.
Oh, yeah.
But the background for some of this is there are camps within Christianity that would try to push people to have a Christian Sabbath. So there are, in certain sects of Christianity, there are people that would prepare meals on,
I understand
on a
what you're
Saturday
saying.
night. Right?
Okay.
There's all of that, and I think that's not healthy.
So
I think that's
let's
bad.
cut that out of the discussion. So you're not saying that the idea behind the Ten Commandments is not embodied in some of what Jesus said. You're just saying Jesus's words are more important than what showed up on the tablet to Moses. And so, if you're intending to follow His words, let me rephrase. My supposition would simply be: if you're intending to follow His words, you will fulfill those 10 commandments, until you falter in following His words.
Yeah, I mean, so all Western law is based off the Magna Carta, right? Is that true? Is the Magna Carta the thing I'm thinking about?
Sure, that sounds realistic,
okay,
but
good.
it's English, so
let's just
it's
say
called
that-
soccer, by the way, you English people.
So if that's true, our American law and English law are going to be very similar in a lot of regards.
Okay,
But again, the Magna Carta is the top thing that it's all coming from. But the Magna Carta at this point doesn't matter to me. Neither does the English law. It's the American law. So
Okay.
yes, obviously there's overlap. I think it's coming from the same source, so there's going to be
Okay.
overlap. But
All
I
right.
guess the point of the conversation is that I don't think you can split up the Ten Commandments from the rest of the Old Testament law. When you're looking at Leviticus and you're looking at not mixing fabrics and you're looking at not eating shellfish, so the way that some
Okay.
people have broken those things apart is by doing the moral, civil.
okay.
And that,
So I see those as completely different. The specific laws about how to live your day-to-day life, I thought had nothing to do with the obligation that a Christian would have, and that obligation was to attempt, for Christ's sake, to fulfill the 10 Commandments
But
to
they've
the
already been
best of our ability.
but they've already been fulfilled by Christ.
I don't disagree.
So why would we fulfill something that has already been fulfilled by Christ? Why would we still go out to try to fulfill a contract that's already been fulfilled? I guess that's the question.
And so I would say I don't see it as a contract. God gave us the example of the father-child relationship for a reason. And the reason this became appropriately acute to me was because I am now a father. And so my children can say whatever they want to say. But when they do what I ask them to do, that's when I know they truly love me and truly respect me. And so, it doesn't matter if I asked them to clean their room and the older brother cleaned it. But I asked you guys to do it? Why did you let him do it? So I'm not trying to suggest that we can do anything in and of ourselves, okay? This is not me suggesting that we can earn our salvation. This is me saying that if you love your parent, you do things that you know will please them, and following their rules to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think we're probably talking around each other because I don't disagree with anything you're saying.
Okay, I got you.
I think
So
that's
we are talking around
the
each
only
other.
the only thing that I'm saying is that I don't think God is asking us to follow the Ten Commandments.
Okay.
I don't think he ever asked Gentiles to follow the Ten Commandments. I think that was strictly to Jews in the Old Covenant. That's a whole other conversation.
I gotcha.
But either way,
Next time
either
on
way,
Filled
as,
with the Spirits.
as believers, we are supposed to be following the law of Christ. Now, by no means does that mean we are without law. I think,
Okay.
again, as I've said, I think
Sure.
Jesus takes up the Ten Commandments a notch.
So
it's an
what
even
you're
harder-
saying is, you're saying is the new charge is the same charge he gave to Peter. If you love me, follow my commands.
Yes.
Or feed my sheep.
Yes,
right?
and I think, and I guess the differentiation that I would make is that I think there's a difference between following Jesus' commands and following the commands of the Old Testament.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
Even though there's obviously overlap, but I think I guess the ultimate point of it is we should look to Christ. We should not look to the Old Covenant because the Old Covenant existed to point us to Christ.
Right.
So don't look back at the things that
Look forward.
and
Wow.
the other.
It's all looking back to an extent, but I understand what you're
But
saying.
it's looking back so you can look forward to Christ, right? And the difference between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant is that the New Covenant is batteries included, right? It's a harder standard, but now that you have the Holy Spirit in you,
it's more attainable.
it's more in a weird way, it's more attainable,
I
right?
gotcha.
Batteries included.
Okay.
Anyway,
All
we've
right.
talked forever. I feel like we could do
We
this.
have. No.
for another hour and a half.
So guys, you're getting a glimpse of what our dinner conversations are, which was the inspiration for this podcast.
Yep.
So we thank you guys for tuning in. Please make sure you like and subscribe. If you distill and bottle a spirit, we'd love to hear from you. We'd be happy to taste your stuff on air. So give us a holler, and otherwise we'll see you next time on Power
Filled with the Spirit. We're so good at that.